Hi everyone, I'm Max from AFM.aero. Welcome to the Pilot Training Connect podcast, where we interview individuals from the pilot training industry to learn more about their organization and their views of the industry. Every week, we will invite an industry leader to sit down with us to share their knowledge and views. This week, I have the great pleasure to be joined by Pedro Raposo, Fleet Sales Director, EMEA of Cirrus Aircraft, to share more information about Cirrus's training aircraft offering and trends that he is seeing in the industry. Welcome to the Pilot Training Connect podcast, Pedro.
Thanks, Max. It's a pleasure to be here with the AFM.aero podcast.
It was great seeing you a few weeks ago in Dubai. So it's great to see everyone starting to travel again. Was it your first kind of international flight visiting a client again in a while?
Fortunately not. We've seen travel expand, and we've had the possibility to go and visit some clients, some prospects, and things have picked up to the point where if I didn't know there was a pandemic before, I would say the world keeps spinning. And we see a lot of people traveling, airports are getting busy, you get the odd flight delay, if you remember those. So the world's coming back to normal, which is good news for everyone, with some challenges, but still coming back to the old normal, if we can put it like that.
I mean, for me, it was just fantastic, fantastic to see from, I think, Dubai Air Show onwards, which was back in November. Things have just opened up more and more. And then I had the great pleasure to meet you. I think it was around 2 months ago. So
yeah, the time flies, and if you're in the flying profession, even better. It's been very interesting the last couple of months, everything that's happening, both of course in geopolitical terms, but also as the world spins back into action, and you're following all these things as some of them affect the business that we're in.
Yeah. And talking about the business that we're in, I think everyone is super curious to learn more about Cirrus Aircraft, and especially its offering as well for flight schools, because I know that within the industry, Cirrus Aircraft, or within the flight training industry, Cirrus Aircraft has a specific brand, a specific reputation. And just for myself personally, even I had an assumption about the offering, but then through meeting you and through learning more about Cirrus Aircraft, I really learned that Cirrus Aircraft is really offering so much more to flight schools, and looking at your clients' reference list as well, you have some really top of the line clients. So I think it would be quite a good idea if you can kind of introduce Cirrus Aircraft, the flight training aircraft that you have for flight schools, and maybe a bit about yourself as well.
Sure, it'll be a pleasure, Max. So let's start with the easy one. About myself, so I'm Pedro Raposo. I'm by training an aerospace engineer. I did my final thesis on aircraft design. I joined Airbus in the year 2000 when 380 was just coming out. Unfortunately, that program has died away, which just goes to show the cycle of the industry. I joined Airbus in the UK, and I was actually at Airbus for 7 years between the UK, Spain, and France. That's where I started my career as an engineer, and then moved on to project management. I then moved on to go into sales, into aerostructures, and then at a point in time, I joined Embraer's MRO in Portugal to be the sales director, where we did everything from commercial, executive, defense, components, engines. At that point, I always wanted to be a pilot. I started training to be a pilot, professional pilot in modular format, which I eventually did. After I left Embraer, then I joined Oliver Wyman Cavok, which is the consulting arm of aviation and aerospace, part of Oliver Wyman, one of the biggest consulting companies, as you may know. And then I joined Cirrus Aircraft last year. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, my experience. So about Cirrus itself, where I am today, it is really one of the most exciting OEMs in the industry, I must say. Cirrus has been a global recognized leader for the last 20 years. in general aviation. It has the SR20, 22T lineup on the piston. It's got the Vision Jet. And they've all been selling fantastic. More than 8,000 aircraft delivered, 13 million hours flown, 220 people have safely returned to their families, having deployed the parachute, the caps, the Cirrus airframe parachute system. So it's been an incredible journey for Cirrus, and I've just joined at a point where the company is growing, it's opening new locations in the US, it's investing, and it's actually ramping up the business. Now, all that success hinges on a great product and a great, let's say, DNA that the company has in terms of safety. And that has been, so far, maybe the derivative, if I may call it, in terms of flight training, which is the TRAC airplane, the TRAC 20, is I'm going to say the best kept secret in the industry, and we're trying to get the word out, and it's great that we have this opportunity to do today, because basically what we offer, what differentiates us is we offer a pilot training system. We don't offer an aircraft, and we base that on three things: safety, philosophy and tools, and advanced technologies. You know, our safety is priority number one. You have CAPS, you have electronic stability program. You've got so many features that help bring those layers of safety to a flight training school. The philosophy and tools, we offer the Cirrus approach, which is tailor-made flight training, interactive content to help you train as a CBT. You've got the interactive flight ops manual. You've got the Cirrus IQ for digital fleet measurement. So in a nutshell, the TRAC is not just the aircraft, which in itself is based on the best-selling SR series, but it's also a bunch of things that bring it as a pilot training system, a value training proposition. And that's what's really different from us. And this is kind of the message that we need to get out. This is not a high-end luxury machine. This is a very practical, durable pilot training system. It's a value training proposition. It's a pilot training system.
Okay. And I think this is also where, especially I can, just talk about myself personally. I, for as many people, as many flight school owners, CEOs, heads of trainings, chief flight instructors that I've spoken to in this industry, when we discuss Cirrus and Cirrus Aircraft, everyone immediately thinks of the SR-22, right? One of the most powerful flight training aircraft, one of the most technologically advanced flight training aircraft, and also one which has, this novel parachute system which gets deployed. And everyone has that assumption, because when we think of Cirrus, we think of the training aircraft being the SR-22. But the industry really does not know, or for the large part that I have spoken to individuals, and even myself up until maybe half a year ago, we did not know that Cirrus is also offering this specific aircraft model for flight schools called the TRAC, the TRAC. Can you just share with everyone and with myself kind of who some of the flight schools are around the world who are using both the SR-22, the really powerful training aircraft, and the TRAC aircraft model? Because I know your client list is really top of the line.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Thanks for asking that. So we've had some really great success with some premium schools. Emirates is of course, I guess, the most visible part of that. So Emirates operates a fleet of 22 SR-22s. Now, the SR-22, as you just mentioned, is a more powerful version than the 20. Let me just put that in context. So the SR-22 has the Continental 6-cylinder 210 horsepower, and the TRAC 20 has the Lycoming 4-cylinder 215 horsepower, the Lycoming IO390. Okay, so Emirates required a little bit more power because of where they are. The Lycoming is a more frugal engine, and it's a much more economic for flight training schools. Now, we've got Emirates operating the SR-22. We've got the Airbus Flight Training Academy in Europe. They operate a mix of 29 Cirrus aircraft between SR20s and 22s, both for their academy and both for external contracts they have with the French Navy. Lufthansa Aviation Training was operating these aircraft in Phoenix, Arizona. Now United has bought 25 TRAC 20s and they've started their AV8 Academy. That's kind of, this is where we're setting the standard in terms of premium flight training in the industry. With United acquiring 25 aircraft with option to get more, and they'll be doing 500 pilots a year. This is like, we're setting here the scene for what professional flight training is. And when we talk about flight training in the context of this podcast, we should remember that we're talking here about professional flight training. So getting people that are going to be on flight decks, people that are going to be professional pilots. We're not talking about leisure or recreational flying, which nothing wrong with that, but that's a different market segment for us. But what we have yet to consolidate as an image and the brand is that the TRAC, while based on a very successful SR selling product, is also a very competitive product, and it's also made for flight training. We've changed the interiors for a durable liner, for synthetic leather. We've made adjustments so that it's a proper flight training aircraft. And with a 2002 pricing point starting at $460K US, most people are surprised how competitive that price is. And if you put that into context with the safety, the tools, the technologies, everything we bring in as a value proposition, this is where schools start to get really interested about, we've never heard of you, tell us more, we want to know more. Cirrus is doing this. We have a bunch of universities in the US that are operating this aircraft. And we could go back as far back as 2006, when Lund University in Europe was the launch customer for Cirrus in terms of flight training. So we have a very good portfolio of customers. The value proposition is really interesting. And now that we are, let's say, coming to terms with this renewed value proposition, we are going out and talking to customers, and we've raised a few eyebrows out there when we talk about these things.
Yeah, I think especially for me, right, and the first time that I heard the price point at which the TRAC was, I think a lot of people in the flight training industry, and as you said, in the professional flight training industry, whenever they're looking at kind of maybe, increasing their fleet, or maybe, it's a new organization setting up a fleet, right? Most people think of the Cirrus, okay, the SR22, they think of the price point of a SR22. But for me, I was really also quite surprised of that competitive price point that the TRAC has, the specialized model that Cirrus has for the professional flight training market, and how that can also be considered when looking at some of the other models, very popular training aircraft models which are out there. On that point, when kind of comparing to some of the other traditional systems that are out there, I know you already mentioned some of the kind of key points of differentiation, but I really want to kind of put them all into a segment again. I was a couple of weeks ago with Emirates, with their pilot training academy, Emirates Flight Training Academy, and I had the absolute pleasure of flying one of the Cirrus SR22 simulators. And I should mention, I wasn't flying, I was a passenger, since I'm not a pilot, but I went through one of these scenarios of the parachute deployment, which was one thing which really stuck with me, because I've been before in FMPT2 simulators of other, let's call it training aircraft models which are out there, which do not have that feature. So it was quite a new experience for me to kind of go through that and learn, about the speed at which, it lands, the impact, and kind of the seats, even, how they are designed to absorb a certain amount of G, as well as then the second thing, which really stuck with me. We had a great flight instructor who was showing us these features, was a kind of the systems, right? Kind of almost like an advanced airline where, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, kind of the banking, right, or the stalling system, right, where the electronic systems are putting kind of safety features within it to to not really or to minimize the risk of any incidents occurring. And I know this is one of the reasons why, organizations such as Emirates Flight Training Academy, United, Airbus, and so on are very much a fan of the aircraft, because these systems are already fairly similar to the advanced systems which are used in the commercial jets. So what would you say are kind of the key unique points about the TRAC when comparing to, let's say, other aircraft training models which are currently out there?
Yeah, so it's a very good point. What we have at hand here is something we call the airline ready pilot. It's our mantra. So we are teeing up people to go from the Cirrus to be professional pilots in other platforms. And I think Emirates has done that brilliantly. I mean, you look at Emirates setup, they do the SR-22, they go to the Phenom, they go to 777, or an A380. They're showing the way on how to use a single engine propeller to train in advanced terms and then move on to jets. Now, there's a lot of stuff around the Cirrus in terms of the airline ready pilot. And we say that maybe the crown jewel is it has an FMS, it's got a proper FMS. And when we Cirrus pilots, we fly, we do like 90% of our tasks are oriented to the FMS, and that you'll find everything there, the QWERTY keyboard, you've got the digital 3-axis autopilot, you've got your lateral modes, your vertical modes. All that stuff is helping you think like an airline pilot to monitor your speed, your trajectory, and it's got a bunch of things that make you act like an airline pilot. We've got integrated engine indications, you've got crew alerting and warning systems. The plane itself has dual battery, dual alternators, dual air data computers, and dual GPS. There's a lot of stuff there for redundancy, but you got to manage those systems. It brings a lot of hazard avoidance technologies to you. It's got a ADS-B in and out. You've got traffic advisory. You'll know where traffic is. It will tell you. It will give you. It's not a TCAS. It won't give you a resolution advisory, but the awareness you have in the airspace, it's awesome. And in terms of the electronic stability program, which you just mentioned, when that's always active, you don't have to activate it. It's a passive autopilot. So if you try to overbank it, overpitch it, the plane will bring you back. And if you insist on doing that a few times, the plane will actually engage autopilot and put you straight and level, just so that you know what you're doing. It does that for you. It's got underspeed protection. It will do a lot to enhance the awareness and safety of flying and flight training. So that is really a big thing when it comes to differentiating us. It's the way that we're setting up these future professional pilots to think, act, and train as what they will be at a not so distant future. It's around the corner. Pilots get trained in 2 years, they go and fly airliners. So it's not like it's in 10 years down the line. So that I would say the airline ready pilot is where we are really different from everybody else.
Okay, but Pedro, if I may ask this, because I'm just putting myself into the shoes of maybe a chief flight instructor or a general manager or a CEO of let's say a medium-sized flight school, which is predominantly focused on training PPL, CPL. So let's say modular or integrated flight training programs. With all of these systems that you've mentioned, do you think, or does Cirrus have like an onboarding phase for these flight schools and also for the instructors? Because I know a lot of these systems might be, for example, if the flight instructors of that school have predominantly trained on, let's call it, more traditional training aircrafts, and then get the opportunity to use these really very safe and high quality systems, flight management system and all of that. Can you kind of share what Cirrus can do in terms of bringing on board potential flight school customers so that they're not necessarily intimidated by the advanced level of some of these systems, And I mean intimidation not by, let's say, a lack of knowledge, but it is quite an advanced step up from maybe some of the we just did the country profile on an Asian country the other day, which has approximately, the whole country has 200 training aircraft, and more than a quarter of them are Cessna 152s, round dial aircraft, right? So you've got a country which has 34 flight schools and 200 aircraft, and more than a quarter are round dial Cessna 152s, right? So for those schools kind of to then go from there to bring using advanced models with such systems, which they want to do, by the way. So they want to train airline ready pilots, right? That is what the flight schools want to do. But can you explain more how Cirrus would kind of offer assistance or onboard anyone who has a potential interest in these TRAC aircraft and TRAC systems?
Sure. So there's a couple of things. The first one I would say is, a lot of schools have yet to realize that there's a technology transition going on. There's only so much you can do with the Cessna 150 with the 6-pack analog. You can teach people how to fly the basics, but you're never going to train them as a professional airline pilot on a Cessna 150, I don't think. And if you're doing that, then you're probably there's some brushing up you need to do there. So the first thing is there's a technology transition. We obviously help our customers go through that. We train their CFIs, we bring all the knowledge, and the biggest deal is the Cirrus approach. So the Cirrus approach is an already existing CBT, which takes you through everything about flying a Cirrus, from basic maneuvers to advanced maneuvers to managing the systems to all the way to engine management. If you were flying one of the Cirruses, like a 22 or 22T that had icing and icing management. So there's all the knowledge has been packaged with interactive videos. There's really a backbone of knowledge that you can provide for schools to then go and deliver that to their students, in an iPad, in the computer. I mean, we're in the 21st century now. We're talking, when we talk about the Cessnas, I flew a lot of Cessna 150s in my days. It's a great plane, but it's suitable for something in your early days, and it's obviously a different kettle of fish. Now, that's not to say that the Cirrus cannot do what that does in the early days. In fact, we have schools and universities that do that. Students get their first flight experience, their first flight time in the Cirruses. Now, the difference is, it's a stepped approach. They don't have to go on day one and program the FMS and shoot an R&P approach somewhere. So there is, I would say, to kind of package what I'm trying to tell you is, the technology transition has been taken into account. Schools will be aware of that, and we have the tools to help them go through that. So this is how Cirrus is changing. It's becoming the gold standard in flight training, because we are, as I said, we're providing the training system. We're not just giving an aircraft.
Okay, fantastic. That is really phenomenal to hear, because that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And since I've been in the simulator, I've seen the advanced level of the aircraft that you have. So that's just something to me as a non-pilot which came to mind. Something else which really comes to mind, which I know is on the mind of a lot of flight school management teams, is always, okay, let's look at, we're looking to expand our fleet, or we're looking to bring in a new fleet. We might do an RFP process. We might speak to the different manufacturers to see kind of what the latest models are out there. Does Cirrus offer any financing solutions, or kind of, let's say if an international flight school is interested in the TRAC, in the specific flight school model that Cirrus offers to them, does Cirrus, and I know it's usually on a case-by-case basis, but does Cirrus offer also financing options?
So yes, on a case-by-case basis, we have a finance partner, which is Air Finance. So we work with them on, let's say, more traditional financing. And on a case-by-case basis, we would look to we would discuss with flight schools whether we could come to some sort of arrangement on some sort of financing or a lease deal, it's hard to be generic because there's quite a few variables involved. But let's say that Cirrus would be receptive to discussing those options. And every case is going to be different. But so the answer is yes, with with some discussions that would need to happen to see the context and the scenario.
Yeah, fantastic. So talking a bit about, I want us to touch upon maybe a bit on the pandemic and kind of how you've seen things, how Cirrus has seen things over the past 2 years. So how is it currently going at Cirrus Aircraft in terms of how you're seeing the market and kind of how your products are being taken up by the market?
So it's been interesting because since the beginning of the pandemic, Cirrus throttled back a bit in the early days of the pandemic, and then it realized that the pandemic actually was making more people fly privately and buying more aircraft. And let's just say last year was a record year in terms of sales. And I think it was only the second year in its history in terms of deliveries, if memory is not failing. And this year we're delivering even more. And I think we're coming to about 12 planes per week, which is awesome. So the pandemic has provided a space for Cirrus to be even more, I would say, more presence in the market, and once we went through that bump of airlines are stopping, airlines don't need pilots, then airlines need pilots, and everybody needs pilots, then all of a sudden, it's all coming back fast and furious. And I think what we saw with United, by them taking the lead on setting up their premier flight school with Cirrus Aircraft, is just the tip of the iceberg. I think the next 2 or 3 years are going to be really exciting, and I think the market is going to pick up a lot more. And I bet you 2 cents that if you talk to any other OEM, they'll probably be there or thereabouts in terms of their market perspective. And recent announcements in the industry probably suggest that that line of thinking is directionally correct.
I couldn't agree more with you. So on our side, we've just finished a study. We just put together a short market study on looking at the timeline of how different airlines across the world are being affected by qualified crew shortage, simply because they might not be able to train as many pilots as they need on the line as quickly enough, or retrain. And we this is the US has really been the place kind of which has from a general aviation perspective really powered through the pandemic. A lot of people wanted to go and fly, a lot of people wanted to do their PPL, and now coming out of it, it's also the American airlines, right, which are leading in terms of the recovery because of the strong domestic market. And now it is the flight training industry which is trying to catch up, because there's always been historically, or because of how our system and how our industry works, right, to train a pilot takes 1 to 2 years. There's always that 1 to 2 year time lag between demand and supply changes in airlines, and then demand and supply changes in terms of the flight training industry. So I think I couldn't agree more with you. The next 2023 and 2024 are going to be, I think, really extreme years for the flight training industry in terms of demand that there will be for flight training capacity. But as part of the pandemic as well, one of the key things which I know has affected the industry a lot is disruptions in supply chains. And I know that flight schools across the world have had issues in terms of getting parts. So not only were they affected by lockdowns, but also a disruption in the supply chains for spare parts for all of these different components. How has it been for Cirrus?
So fortunately for Cirrus, we have not had supply chain disruptions. And a lot of people have asked us about, you've got these really incredibly good Garmin Perspective Plus avionics. Have you been affected by those? Well, we've not. We have been fortunate enough that our production rate has been properly fed from the supply chain. and we've not had any. I mean, there's always some part shortage in of some sort, but nothing that would be considered a problem or a serious supply chain problem as such. So I'm happy to report that we've not had any of those.
Fantastic, fantastic. And looking at the future, then, how do you see the flight training industry developing? Just to give a bit of perspective, I know currently, just like how I had mentioned, we at AFM.aero, we have a database of all flight training organizations in the world where we're tracking all of the fleets. We're doing country profiles, just like what I just mentioned. We recently finished a country profile for India, where, as I said, out of the 220 or so training aircraft, more than a quarter of them are Cessna 152s, and they're looking to kind of refleet. I know in North America as well, there's a couple of really large schools which see that it is about time to kind of refleet or update their training aircraft. But how do you see the next 5 years or so develop in terms of the flight training industry, the professional flight training industry, and then also kind of the training aircraft which will be used to deliver that flight training?
That's a very interesting. I get asked a lot about what's ahead of us, and I always, my crystal ball's a bit fuzzy, but there's two things we know for sure. One is there is going to be a continued trend of technology advancements, and I think there Cirrus is very well positioned. And the second one is sustainability, I'll come back to that one. So the first one is there's going to be, I think, a closer focus to training pilots and mirror the training as much as possible as an airline operation. So we have examples of people doing that. And I think those that will be able to do cadet programs and work with airlines and make their training as technologically advanced as possible, and in conjunction with their end customer, is, I think, where the trend is going for those that are going to be successful. Some will survive, some will fade out, but those that are going to lead the pack are probably going to be doing, they're going to realize that it's a different game. In terms of sustainability, obviously there's a lot of activity and conversation around what that's going to be. And of course, the elephant in the middle of the room is electric. So electric, anybody will tell you that it's the future. It is indeed the future. It's a future that's coming. In fact, it's already here. Some OEMs already have some prototypes and some aircraft that demonstrate those capabilities. We don't think those are still in a way that it's useful or practical for the objectives of what we propose to our customers as a flight training machine. The secret is known to everybody. It's the power density of the batteries. Until that is in a way that the power to weight ratio is not useful enough to have enough power to do a proper mission, and that the plane doesn't weigh like 50 tons, you're not there yet. So, but there are people doing very interesting things there, and I think at some point electric is going to be well with us, and Cirrus is not an exception. We may not be very vocal, but like everybody else, we're monitoring the developments and we're keeping an eye on it. Now, there's other shorter term things we're doing. Avgas is top of mind for some schools. Cirrus is part of a group that is called EAGLE, which is Eliminate Aviation Gaslight Emissions. And basically that's on the shorter term, is to eliminate leads from avgas, or let's say transition to unleaded fuels. And we're looking at some other sustainability initiatives, which we will talk at some point. So there's the shorter term activity, and then there's the longer term view and vision. Okay, so I think in a nutshell, schools, the machines, I'm going to be as bold as in the next decade, the machines will be a little bit different, but they'll still be technologically advanced. And flight schools that will take that leverage the technology and work close with airlines, they will be the ones that they're going to be successful. And I think Cirrus has a word to say and a role to play there.
That's really, thank you for sharing these insights and looking into, all of us were looking into this crystal ball, which, from last year to this year already has changed significantly. And I'm very excited on, especially in this decade, how things are going to develop, because I think the pandemic has really brought along forces which is really going to reshape the professional flight training industry that we know of it. Because I personally believe that, or what we believe at AFM.aero, is that demand is going to come back extremely strong. We're already seeing it now in the US. This is going to spread across the world. We're one of the few organizations which have looked at the supply side of training new pilots. We've seen there's been a significant decrease in the total global flight training capacity in the number of flight schools. And because of how quickly this demand will come back, I think, and this is once again a prediction that we feel that a lot of people said 2019 was the year of cadet programs. So where airlines were looking to set up specific supply lines for new, first officers. I and AFM.aero, we personally predict that we're going to see an even more extreme version of this in 2023 and 2024, but we're already starting to see it now with, Cathay Pacific have announced the largest cadet training program on record. EasyJet has restarted their cadet training program, 1,000 cadets over the next 5 years. Ryanair, 500 cadets from just one flight school, and they have 5 flight school partners. So I feel going into next year, we're going to see a huge number of cadet program announcements as airlines are looking to secure their supply pipelines of pilots. And in line with that, there will really be the demand for aircraft types which are, which deliver the goal or the mission that the pilot training or flight training is supposed to do in order to get individual cadets to the right-hand seat of a flight deck, be it in the case of, as you mentioned here, some airlines in the Middle East, straight to Phenom, and then from Phenom maybe to wide-body 777, or be it A320, Boeing 737, ATR, any of these things. So thank you very much for sharing your insights today and telling us more about Cirrus. So Pedro, how can people find out more information about the TRAC aircraft, and how can they potentially contact you?
Okay, so that's actually very easy. CirrusAircraft.com. We have a specific part of our website dedicated to fleet and special mission. Look for the TRAC. Alternatively, you can email me, praposo@cirrusaircraft.com. That's Praposo@cirrusaircraft.com. Look me up on LinkedIn. Pleasure to talk to anyone that's interested about the TRAC or Cirrus in general. And I must say, it's been great to talk to you, Max. Always a pleasure. It's a great conversation. Thanks also for sharing your insights and your research. And I'm really pleased that Cirrus has had the opportunity to have this space to talk about our products.
Thank you, Pedro. And a final question from my side is, I know there's a lot of people who in the industry who visit the different conferences that are happening all over the world again. So will you be at any specific conferences in the next kind of 3 to 6 months, kind of where people could potentially connect with you?
Absolutely. We will have a presence in, let's say, every major conference. So we'll be at Aero Friedrichshafen next week. We're going to be at Watts in Orlando. We're going to be at the Pilot Expo in Berlin. And then, after that, every major conference you can think of, back end of the year, we're going to be at Berlin again for IATS. So Cirrus is there, look us up. We'll be happy to talk to you.
Perfect, Pedro. I wish you a great afternoon, and hope to see you soon.
Okay, thank you. Likewise, Max. Thank you so much.
Thank you.